So tonight, I was going to begin with a passage on this subject of emptiness that I'm going to take from a book titled The Philosophy of Zen Buddhism, written by a Korean philosopher who's actually based in Germany, Byung-Chul Han. And it's in a chapter that's titled Dwelling Nowhere. So it's kind of, for us practitioners of the Heart Sutra, if you're asked to fill out on a form your address, you can just write nowhere. That's my dwelling. I dwell nowhere. I'm going to actually try that sometime. See how that goes, maybe with the IRS or something. But here's the passage from the chapter titled Dwelling Nowhere. Dwelling nowhere is still dwelling, but it is one that is without desire, without a firmly closed up self. And then a little bit further on, he says, and this is really important. It's kind of another segue. I throw some segues in every few weeks towards Sandokai because I know the Heart Sutras heavy stuff to deal with, all this negativity that can plant the seeds of nihilism within us. So I have to be careful here, and I try to apply antidotes from time to time just so nobody goes off that cliff. And this is such a one. He says, the Zen Buddhist path does not end with this no, the no that occurs so many times in the Heart Sutra. It doesn't end with that. It leads back to a yes, namely the inhabited, multiform world. That yes is the deep meaning of the Zen saying, all is as it was before. Yesterday, I ate 3 bowls of rice. This evening, 5 bowls of wheat gruel. And we know this teaching from the ox herding pictures, which are hanging on the wall in the dining room, going back into the marketplace, into the world of discrimination, which is the 10th picture. So the Zen path does not end with the 8th picture. It does not end with no. It does not end with the Heart Sutra. However, the Heart Sutra is an essential gateway to get back to the world of this and that. Otherwise, there's just this and that. You might say we're recognizing that in our pre-practice experience of this and that, there was no foundation. So what we're doing, we could see retreating to texts such as the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the writings of Nagarjuna, all the teachings on emptiness. We're going back and planting a foundation now. But it's a foundation that welcomes all the additions that come with our return back into the world, and it will fully support them now because we've built such a strong, a boundless foundation. And I just wanted to get that point across. And the opening passage that I recited from this text, that dwelling nowhere is still dwelling, but it's one that's without desire, without a firmly closed up self. So we get into the section of Shahaku's text that I'm going to be looking at this evening. We get into this subject of a force, which is carryover from Uchiyama's teaching. Uchiyama used that kind of language, life force. So to be in a place of no dwelling is to literally be with the force. And the Star Wars mythology can maybe help us here. Actually, I find it helpful. That even as it's portrayed there is this sense of just being at one, being with the force. May the force be with you. And the force is this sense of shunyata that's running through all things. So that you're not stuck in any one place. There's no place you just, because of your desires. So in the training of a Jedi Knight, it's very similar to Zen training, you might say, in terms of studying the self, going into the cave and finding where your fears are. Where are and we could expand on that to where are your desires? Where are the things that you're getting caught up on? You have to go into that Jedi cave and face those and then come out and be able to experience the force, the life force running through all things. And if we see that as a force rather than just all these entities like billiard balls kind of bumping into each other, it's a much richer way and a more realistic way, I would say, to actually experience the world and to experience ourselves. So if the force is with us, we understand that is our true nature. We can still go through the conventional world in the conventional ways because that's how we relate to one another. We're not saying you have to just scrap that. Actually, that would be silly because it serves so many very useful purposes. So we should go back to it, but with this deeper understanding that they don't have own being. They don't have substantial being. They're just conventions that we set up because it's helpful to do so. That's what they are. So use them as such, but always with that understanding. But that's all they are. Because we end up turning them into the Holy Grail. Maybe the best example of that in our society, in our time, is property. And that's kind of we find it hard to believe that's that in its modern incarnation, that it's only a few centuries old. This establishment of property rights. And yet we've now taken a convention and it's become like a holy grail. With just like kings and queens used to rule by divine right. It's where their authority came from. Well, we view our current economic system based on private property as divinely ordained. Many subscribe to that. It's just a convention. It worked for a while, I think. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder. But I do think overall it kind of did, despite all its all its warts and all of its malfunctioning, period, with great regularity, the cycles would be gone through. So I think that just provides one classic example of taking a convention and turning it into something so much more. So if we take something like that convention and begin to look at it from the light of the Bodhisattva way, of a place of no dwelling, where we are simply in tune with the force that runs through all things. And look at the precepts that we chanted tonight, or the paramitas that we'll be looking at Saturday morning with our study of Shantideva. These are far better guides because they are part of the foundation rather than just a convention. So these far predate capitalism. The paramitas, the Eightfold Path, have a pretty impressive heritage to them. And I would say they are pretty reliable guides for us. These core Dharma teachings. They're empty, nonetheless, just like everything else. I'm not trying to turn them into something more than what they are. But this is where I think they can rise above being a convention. Some of the things they might lead us to as a skillful means, for example, could be in the world of convention. But they're not trapped in that. They have that flexibility, which is built in to all of these Buddhist teachings. It's their strength rather than their weakness. Many people would see that kind of malleability, flexibility to adapt to a particular situation. They would see that as a sign of its weakness. Strength is when it's just absolute. That's strength. And that's why we create the absolute notions of things. Because we're looking for that kind of strength, even though it's illusionary. It's not real. Because that's not reality. And just a little bit of testing of things that are set up as the absolute always bear that out. We know that from the precepts when we study them, how any given precept can become a problem. Or the paramitas. Patience, important practice. Or if you turn it into an absolute, it can become a huge problem. You're practicing patience where it's completely inappropriate for that scenario. You could be patient with somebody causing great harm. Say, oh, we need to be patient. Years later, we need to be patient. How many people are suffering through that stretch of time because I'm following that precept. I'm being patient. So we don't turn any of those into absolutes just for that reason. Any of the precepts, any of the practices, there are no absolutes. That's part of the foundationless foundation, the gateless gate. So there are gates, there are foundations, but don't take them as absolute. Everything. In order to be with the force of the emptiness of all things, requires openness. We have to be open. Beginner's mind, don't know mind. All these teaching phrases that various teachers of recent times have given us. are our way of taking these teachings of emptiness, of impermanence, of no self, and being able to use them in our life so that we don't fall prey to the absolute and our tendency to create the absolute, while also, though, not falling off the cliff of nihilism, to be able to follow this middle path, which is what this quote is pointing to. That the Zen Buddhist path does not end with this no, but what he doesn't say here, but it has to pass through. It's why in the Rinzai tradition, the gateway koan is usually moved. The first koan is to pass through this gateway of no. It leads back to a yes, namely the inhabited multiform world. So through the no, we come back to yes. And in the coming back to yes, we come back to the conventional, to distinguishing things, but no longer as absolutes. So we don't attach, we don't cling. This is why there's non-dwelling. I don't dwell here. Or if I do, it's like on a very short-term lease. At this time, this is appropriate, it seems, under these circumstances. But we are, just like reality is variable, it's impermanent. So are we. What's not invariable is our way of relating to these other things. So when we recite the precepts, they're very meaningful to us and very serious. Taken as these conventional guidelines that have passed through the practice of no, of move, and our understanding of it. So we can say, do not kill. Respect life, honor life. But as we say that, we also recognize to live is to kill. We have to kill. Even if you're a vegetarian, even if you're a vegan, still killing. Still killing. And we have to. But that doesn't mean we become genocidal. We relish that. There are ways to go through a life where we recognize we have to kill, but do it with this sense of the sacred. So, and still honoring life. Yeah, one of the old-fashioned ways we used to do it that doesn't get done much anymore is the saying of grace before a meal. And we did that before Thanksgiving dinner. I haven't done that in a while. Of course, they know there's a priest at the table, so I guess he gets to say grace, right? But it's a beautiful practice. And of course, we have meal chants in Zen, which is a way of acknowledging. The efforts that bring us this food, the lives that it costs, and so on. Because for some of us, Just being a vegetarian won't quite satisfy it because we're pretty fond of plant life too. I don't just say that facetiously. I mean, plant life is incredible. And they're kind of our symbiotic partners here on this planet. They give us oxygen, we give them carbon dioxide. They're very near and dear to me. So to be able to have that reverential feeling for all life, that's the essence. That's being with the force. So we take all the precepts very, very seriously. When we speak, we speak not, and so many of the precepts are about speech. Not to slander, obviously not to speak falsehoods, not to praise self. All these aspects of speech. So it's good to be mindful of these. And yet, if somebody, especially if they're near and dear to me, had something nice happen to them, I want to hear about it. Inflate yourself a little bit. Maybe you'd have to be a little inflated to talk about it, but that's okay. I want to hear about it. So hold those precepts loosely. On the other hand, if they were always boastful about this, that, and the other thing, then maybe that requires some revisiting. So just trying to take these teachings from the Heart Sutra and apply them to our daily lives. What do they mean? This practice of no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No Buddhist teachings, no Four Noble Truths, no 12-fold chain of co-arising. But actually, the section of Shahaku's text that I wanted to look at this evening is titled, Who is Avalokiteshvara? Because he is the teacher in this sutra. And he's the one who's practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita. Well, keep in mind now, from what I've been saying, who is Avalokiteshvara? See, our mind naturally wants to put him in a skin bag or some sort of container, at least a statue. We realize most people that is really not a current living being, although we'll circle back to that in just a moment. But most people say, oh, that's a statue. I've seen those. I know about Avalokiteshvara. He's part of that pantheon of bodhisattvas. He's the bodhisattva of compassion. Kuan Yin in China, Kanzeon in Japan. But who is Avalokiteshvara? And the rather harsh Zen teaching about Buddha, that if you meet Buddha on the street, kill that Buddha, also applies to Avalokiteshvara. Any of the bodhisattvas, any of the Buddhas and ancestors, we have to find them all. We're the ones who keep them alive. They live through us. So if we externalize Avalokiteshvara, we've consigned it to the dustbin. And it just Actually, I remember uh, hearing a talk by Jan Chosen Bays at a symposium in Atlanta some years back. And the Bodhisattva, she spent a lot of time studying, venerating is Jesus. And she talked about how on a trip to Japan, there would be these temples filled with Jesus, almost like warehouses full of Jesus. And it was kind of really sad to her to see them all closed up as these objects when the spirit of Jesus has to be out there. So to fix them in some form and then stick them somewhere, whether it's on an altar or in a warehouse or wherever. It's kind of sacrilegious. So we're the ones that bring them to life. So who is Avalokiteshvara? Look within. Just like who is Buddha? Look within. So our Zazen practice is opening up our access to the answer to this question, who is Avalokiteshvara? It's us. And we need to find it. Because as Shahaku expresses it, Avalokiteshvara is one aspect of Buddha nature, the aspect of compassion. Pretty major aspect. So if we truly see our true nature, then we will become very intimate with Avalokiteshvara, because there will be no separation. And we will truly have seen Avalokiteshvara. And we will know who he is. And more importantly, not who he is, that's turning him into an object, but how he works in the world. How the force is with him, which means with me. When I can embody Avalokiteshvara. So within this chapter, Shahaku is also equating Prajnaparamita with the release from suffering, distress, in other words, dukkha, the third noble truth. Since we understand the cause of dukkha, now we understand how we can transcend it, how we can go beyond it, go to the other shore. And of course, in the Four Noble Truths, that consists of the Eightfold Path. In Zen, that consists of the practice of Zazen. That's so critical, is to understand that it's through the practice of Zazen that we practice deeply the Prajnaparamita. What Avalokiteshvara is doing in the course of the narrative of the Heart Sutra comes at the very beginning. Avalokiteshvara, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceived that all five skandhas are empty. That's enlightenment, that's awakening. In Dogenese, that means dropping off of body and mind. Seeing that all five skandhas are empty. They're dropped off then, when we truly see it. And without Zazen, this is why Zazen is such a wonderful foundation for our practice. Because without it, our natural tendency is just to make this all an edifice created by our ideas. So we need a practice like Zazen to clear the deck of all those thoughts and ideas. Because it's deeper than that. It's more profound than that. Words can't reach it. At best, they can only point in the direction. And Zazen is the practice that will take us where we need to go. The words can only point, but they can't take us there. Is, I think, a good way of seeing that. So the words, and Dogen certainly spent a lifetime with all of his teachings directing people to the practice of Zazen. So words could point the way. But then it's up to each individual to actually do that. The words can't cross to the other shore in and of themselves. That requires that practice. And without Zazen, we're just swimming around with all those ideas. And they're great ideas. They're great thoughts. But they don't become transformational. It's just intellectual. And we can't embody what those ideas are about. We have to really become it. And that can take quite a while. You know, our own, one of our sacred secular documents, the Declaration of Independence, is a good example. All men are created equal. And how long did that take to actually practice with that? The words were pointing the way, but they weren't it. They weren't it. Because it wasn't so. But enough people took them seriously and kept working at it. And no one took them more seriously than those who were enslaved, for whom the hypocrisy of that statement was so obvious. But through the practice of individuals coming together, and it's still a work in progress. It's practice. Just like the Dharma teachings, it's ongoing practice. It's the only way it can possibly serve us in our lives, because life is ongoing. That's why there's nothing to attain. We've talked about that previously. What is the sense of attainment that's being spoken to there? The sense of the arhat, or the once returner, or the stream enter, all these levels of attainment that were laid out within the Theravada tradition for practitioners, so that there was something to attain. And that's being completely pulled away now by this teaching. It's represented by the Heart Sutra, the teachings of the Prajnaparamita literature, of the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. So, and I guess one other point I'll get across here before I finish up with this section is at least that peripherally, Shahaku references in this chapter, I think, because I did jot a note down to this effect, although it could have just been something that popped into my mind as a result of something else he was saying. Be that as it may, though. What I wanted to point to is the sense of the arising of bodhicitta. Or the way I set it out is what made each of us decide to come here. The first time, tonight, what is it that makes us come here? Especially coming here as in beginning a practice. So Suzuki called this wisdom seeking wisdom. And I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. So the prajna that precedes the prajna paramita, the perfection of wisdom. But to even get on the path to practice deeply, it takes wisdom just to even take that up as the path you want to be on. So it's very helpful, I think, to understand that there is a wisdom within us that's usually at work. It keeps bringing us here. It keeps bringing us to all the various things that we consider part of our practice, which can be as varied as you can possibly imagine. It could be anything. And of course, we're practicing when we don't even realize it. But that only becomes possible because we built kind of a structure of practice where we do embody the practice in a number of different ways. So there is intentionality, and the more we do of that, then the more our practice starts to just flow out of its own. And then, wisdom that's seeking wisdom begins to actually blossom into prajna paramita, the perfection of wisdom. But in order for that to happen, it's kind of essential that wisdom is not seen because it's going across the shore. The paramitas are always the other side. So it's not having a sense of, oh, I'm wise. It's just you've transformed. Just like generosity is an easy one to point to. We can be generous and no, we're really generous. Look, I did this, this, and this. Or you can just, that's your nature is to be generous. And you don't even look at it any other way. That's generosity on the other side of that great waterway. So just this understanding of prajna and how it runs through our practice from beginning to a fully mature practice. Wisdom is there every step of the way because it is inherent. We're not creating wisdom, we're awakening to it, to what's already there. The Buddha nature that's already there. That's where we'll find prajna. Prajna will find the Buddha nature, and the Buddha nature, you could say, will open that to you. So the whole treasury that we each constitute, the Dharma treasury, one of my Buddhist names from my first teacher, that's always there. That didn't suddenly appear when she gave me my first Buddhist name at my Jukai ceremony. It was just affirming for me that is my nature. She could have given that to any of the other people that were ordained at the same ceremony. Because that's true for all of us. So that's the beautiful thing about these Buddhist names. They're pretty interchangeable. And I heard stories. We heard what at Olad about the interchangeability that names actually do get. accidentally given to the wrong person. But hey, I think there's a deep beauty to that, a deep sense of Dharma teaching. So I love it. In fact, my priest Rakusu, for the longest time, didn't have any inscribing on it at all. So this side was completely blank because of the nature of my priest ordination. That was kind of a fast track with my Dharma sister Trisha. She was going to be ordained at the Rahatsu session that year, and I had a good way to go yet. But I was already teaching Cleveland, Mansfield. The decision was made, he needs to be ordained. So they finished that stuff up, but the Rakusu wouldn't come till later. And the people down in Mansfield sewed that for me. I didn't get the inscription, so people want to see it. Show them the blankness. What? It's an emptiness.
It's empty.
This is the Prajnaparamita Rakusu. There's just nothing you could possibly put on there. So ultimately, Mike was able to get his hands on that some years later. He put all the appropriate inscriptions on it. But I kind of missed the emptiness. All right. Is there anything anybody wanted to speak to, inquire about, complain about? Not a thing. Okay, well, let's go ahead and chant out.
I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows.
All right. Well, good night, everyone, and we'll be back here Saturday morning at 9:30 for our August, yes, it'll be August, our August Jukai class.
Starting with chapter 8.
Chapter 8, verse
Yes.
1.
I gave you the wrong.
No, it was close enough. You had them starting before, so
Yeah.
that's always okay.
We can pick up all the books tonight because we won't use